Hello. Hello. Hey, everybody. This is Jessie Drew, psychologist to the movies. And I am here, as always, with my brother, Jeff Watson Esquire III, who is the attorney on hand to the movies that we dissect every week. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'll be honest with you. This movie, woo, it's a little bit heavy, especially for folks that deal with mental illness. But we'll get there. We'll talk about
it. You guys know that when it comes to choices, it's starting to get easier and easier to tell who picks what. So, as you guys all know, veterans of our audience know, if it's a game movie, it's a Jeff pick. And now you guys are starting to maybe pick up on a little pattern that if it's a movie that has to do with a woman who is losing her marbles and maybe doesn't know what's real and what's not real, then it's usually a movie that I've chosen. Although those are the exact kind of movies that I try to avoid. So I don't know what that says about me. Who cares? Because today's show is not about me. It is about Amy Adams's character, Anna Fox, in The Woman in the Window, which was released this year. I believe it was another one that was meant to be released last year, but because of the pandemic, we all know that story. So we are going to dive right in. We are going to announce spoiler alerts as always, because, maybe you don't know. Maybe this is your first time listening to our show or watching us on YouTube. You don't know. But yeah, spoiler alert. So, but I'm fairly certain that a lot of people have seen this one. This one was a highly anticipated movie and was kind of like we're all, still kind of stuck at home. The movie theaters have not really opened. So this is a really big movie to watch. And we all love a thriller, right? I mean, we all love a thriller. And this is Hitchcockian, right? So I'm just going to throw that out there, that word Hitchcockian. It is. Rear Window is playing in the beginning of the movie. You see that it's playing on the TV. It's very much like, hey, we know that we owe this movie to Rear Window, Hitchcock's great movie. So we're just going to put it right out there and shout out our influences, and away we go. So The Woman in the Window, definitely a psychological thriller, starring Amy Adams. She's amazing. Whatever you think of this movie, she is amazing in this role. She sells it 2,000%. She doesn't strike me as, in all of my psychological experience, she doesn't come across as an actress trying to portray mental illness. She just comes across as someone who's living in the thick of it. And, she is extremely agoraphobic. You look up agoraphobia, and there's her picture in the dictionary, which basically means she can't leave her house. She is too terrified and terrorized by the idea of leaving her house. She gets panic attacks, which, if you've never had one, bless your soul and bless your heart. Count your lucky stars, because they are hell. And so to understand her character, you got to understand that it's not just a matter of not wanting to step foot out her door. She can't. We don't really get a sense or a reason why during like 3/4 of the movie. But we just know she takes a lot of pills. She sees a psychologist or a psychiatrist for frequently who comes to her house. She was a psychologist. She was a doctor of psychology herself before whatever trauma happened to her happened. She seems to be pretty self-sufficient given her shortcomings in terms of being able to leave the house. She's got a whole system down. She's got, a delivery boy who comes and leaves the food and leaves everything, and she leaves the tip. And she has her downstairs tenant who lives in like a furnished basement apartment who comes up to check on her, who seems pretty aggressive to me. Did you get that sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, even from the very beginning, it's like there's something different about this guy, and obviously we found out some of that later on.
Yeah. Yep. He comes across as like he's got a sense of humor, but it's pretty aggressive. She relates pretty well to him, so we kind of, as an audience, we kind of brush it off. I wouldn't say she's happy with her life, but she's made her adjustments. She is on the phone. She calls. We're aware that she's separated from her husband, and she is separated from her daughter. Probably want to take that word separated and think of it quite literally. And she has phone calls with them regularly. So we're not really told if the separation is that maybe the husband and the daughter are living somewhere else because she's so ill, they don't want it to. This is all my assumption, that because she seems like a pretty conscientious person. I assumed when she was making those phone calls to her daughter that she was living on her own because she didn't want the illness to affect her daughter, and that the father went along, because she seems to have a pretty decent talking relationship with her husband. So moving along, she gets a visit one night from, I forget if the son visits her first or whatever. There's new neighbors across the street, and this is a major event for her because, she's in her house. What has she got to do but watch TV, take her pills, read books, and then look out the window to see what's going on outside? What she sees outside directly across the street is that there's a new family that's moved in. It's Gary Oldman, his wife, and his teenage son. The teenage son comes to visit Amy Adams' character, Anna Fox. He came across to me as autistic, some sort of a developmentally disabled sort of teen, definitely didn't behave like a 16-year-old would, and was very needy, seemed very needy on her affection. So she becomes kind of aware that something's off and amiss in their house, and she tells him to come over whenever he wants, and she sends over, the mother sends over a box of tea for Anna. Okay, so she's made friends with them, and it's kind of, you can tell it's going to be a significant character in the story. Then that night, a woman comes over, and she assumes that it's the mother of the child who lives across the street, because she sees her across the street in the apartment, and then she comes right over after seemingly having an argument with her husband. And she is Julianne Moore. She is very sort of brusque, but also funny. She is very upfront and out loud about her opinions and her feelings, and she's not at all, she's not handling the situation with Anna delicately. She outright asks her, like, what do you live in here? Like, you don't go out? Like, what's your problem? Kind of a thing. But we take it to see that it's her personality more than just like her being rude. Anna seems to really take to that. Did you get that? I got that sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost like it's what she had been looking for in a friend. It's like she needed that kick in the pants that was like, what are you doing? And someone to not be so PC with her.
Yeah.
And I feel like like you said, she kind of it's like she got happy whenever she would say something. I mean, me, like, here, I'm cringing and she's smiling, like, oh, okay, this is cool. And I'm just like, what in the world? So, yeah.
I had the same reaction, a very similar reaction. I was just like, whoa, but Anna seemed to laugh and smile anytime I was kind of, like you said, cringing, So it seems like, this woman, and then she's like, am I making this up? She's smoking cigarettes. Like, they're like smoking cigs, having wine. Anna's having like lots of wine, which, we don't need. The doctor does say you shouldn't be drinking on your pills, but nobody needs to hear that. We already know she's on a ton of medication for her various psychological and psychiatric problems, and her disorders. So, she shouldn't be, but she does. She does. So, and she will be the first to admit, like, yeah, I'm drinking, and I can't remember certain things because of my memory was not so good because I was drinking that night. We see her throughout the movie constantly throwing out wine bottles, which is like, I don't know. That alone is scary. You know what I mean? Like, maybe just because, like, I'm not a drinker. I'm not, and I wish I liked wine because I feel like wine is so nice to, like, have a drink of wine, and and it's kind of like supposed to be good for you and stuff, but I just can't tolerate the taste of it. So to see, like, so many bottles just cleaning up, like, and you hear the clinking and everything, and just like, oh, ugh. Especially on top of pills, it's like the next morning you get like a bad headache, and whatever. All right, so that's enough of me. so her friend leaves her house. She's kind of happy. She feels like she's had a good night. Like, or it's almost like somebody you'd meet at a party, and you're grateful that they're the ones who are, like, not PC and saying everything that everyone else is thinking. So you can see Anna having some fun finally with someone who's, like, kind of raunchy. The movie goes on, and she sees, so the woman in the window part comes up because Anna hears, like, a disturbance. She's already suspected that Gary Oldman's character hits his family or somehow terrorizes his family. And she hears screaming. She goes to her window. She sees the woman who was over at her house being murdered. And she's terrified. She calls 911. Eventually, the cops and Gary Oldman himself comes over. And they're like, you didn't see what you thought you saw. And she's like, what are you talking about? I saw, like, this woman getting murdered. His wife, he murdered his wife. Like, I saw it with my own eyes. And then the scariest part of the movie, in my opinion, comes up, because then the wife of Gary Oldman shows up, which is not the same woman that she was hanging out with and partying with that night. And it's Jennifer Jason Leigh, who is also blonde, thin, and white, and has a similar type face as Julianne Moore. And she comes up and she's just like, I'm, the missus, and I'm very much alive. Like, you didn't see it. So we are thrown as an audience into thinking, we know she saw Julianne Moore getting hurt. We know that something is going on, and all these people are denying it. And one of the two cops is antagonizing her. The other officer is kinder to her and, like, seems to be understanding. Like, maybe you didn't see what you thought you saw. Like, it's okay, but look, she's here. Like, she's alive. She's fine. And she's like, that's not, like, what's their name? Hang on a second. I have to find her name because it is obnoxious. Jane is the woman that was hanging out with Aunt Anna, Jane Russell.
Yep.
And the father, I guess, is Mr. Russell. I don't know his name. So, she's trying to make sense of it. The rest of the movie is pretty much her trying to make sense of what the heck she saw. She goes like on a trip, not literally, she just goes on this trip of like trying to find out any kind of dirt she can on Mr. Russell. He works in finance. They just moved from, was like Massachusetts or something like that. And yeah, and you know, she is like, why did they leave? Oh, his assistant died. She was, she died, and she's like, okay, this can't be a coincidence. This guy is like murdering women left and right. She's really battling her demons all this while, because she's calling into question, like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I can't even rely on my own thoughts. I can't rely on what I saw, but I know in my heart what I saw was true. She starts going downstairs, which was like this is like a big mistake. She goes downstairs and like looking for the tenant downstairs, David, I think his name is, and he like surprises her and is really pissed at her for being in his apartment, and makes moves like he's going to hurt her, and sort of kind of just comes out with it that he's on parole from like jail for an assault that took place back at some bar back in Connecticut, and he's not supposed to be living outside of Connecticut. So he was like, are you going to bust me? And she's like, no, I just want to get back upstairs and have you not threaten me, because he's making moves like he's going to hurt her. So then we kind of think like, oh, did David had something to do with it? Because he did say that he slept with some woman. We know we heard like, noises of somebody else being downstairs. There's all these red herrings, basically. The movie is good at all the red herrings it gives you. Jeff, at this point, like, what were you thinking in terms of her credibility and like the characters that we've like, kind of come up to and kind of been close to so far?
Yeah, I mean, it was, for me, I knew that she had a lot going on in her life. So, as the member of the audience, as the viewer, we're seeing all of this through her eyes. So whenever we got that little, and it's not so little, but that little nice little pivot from Julianne Moore to Jennifer Jason Leigh, I was like, okay, one or two things is happening. Either she's just completely out there and she imagined this and we were taken along for that ride, or there's something rather sinister that might be happening. And I guess maybe I identified with the character a little bit more than most people probably would, because I think a lot of people watching it will be like, yeah, she's completely lost it. I mean, let's look at how many pills she takes and this and that and how much she drinks. And, it could very easily be this thing. But for me, I identify with it more. And I'm like, I actually believe her. I just think that there may be some dots that aren't connected when it comes to what she saw and interpreted, what everyone else is saying actually happened, and then what the director and the actors want us to see through this lens. So yeah, I mean, I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because I can identify. So
yeah, I felt the same way. I believed her. Like, I believed her like the whole way through, until it was time to pause on the believing. And we'll get there. But yeah, I felt the same way. I felt like, and this speaks to something I wanted to talk about with you. I wanted to believe her because I also tend to think that, and I've experienced this, where because you have mental health issues, that sort of like taints and colors and rocks the boat on anything when you're dealing with authority figures like the police or doctors, especially doctors that are not psychiatrists. and psychiatrists too, you know, like they want to know your diagnosis. Once your diagnosis is known, then that's all she wrote, you know, and everything can be shoehorned into, you know, your diagnosis. Well, that's because she's X, Y, or Z, or he's X, Y, or Z. And I had an experience with a doctor that comes to mind. I mean, I've had several experiences with this, but one that comes to mind right away was that I was having sciatic pain, which I was having a lot during certain years, connected to my back issues. So it got so bad that I went to the hospital, my local hospital, and the doctor, long story short, the doctor asked what was going on. I told him. It also happened that I was still grieving the loss of a family member. But while I definitely believe that stress can induce, you know, lots of issues physically within our bodies, I'm a proponent of that. I know for sure that this had nothing to do with the stress. This is a condition that I had before my family member passed away. And as soon as he heard that someone passed away, he like closed his book. He sent one of the two nurses out and just talked to me and said that, like, you know, it was going to be okay, et cetera, et cetera. And then said, you can discharge her now. I mean, they didn't even so much as give me Advil for the pain that I was in, which was really sucky. And I knew that, like, if they hadn't heard that it would have been a different story, you know? And so over the years, I've weighed, like, I'll weigh a situation. Like, is this the kind of situation where if I say that I've got a psychiatric, you know, illness, that they're going to dismiss or overlook certain things? If so, then I don't check that box that says, what medications are you on, or do you have any psychiatric illnesses? If it's a situation where it could be a detriment if they don't know, because I might get prescribed something or whatever, then I'll cop to it. But you really have to, like, you know, you really have to be careful. You have to pick and choose carefully, like who you open that up to. And, like, I don't mean just like friends and stuff. Thankfully, I've not had any friends that have ever, you know, kind of blown that up for me. But just doctors, I can't even imagine the police. My God, I try to avoid, knock on wood, I mean, that I haven't, but, like, I try to avoid all interactions with the police at any cost. Being a person of color, you do not want to have to deal with the police. Anytime I've had to, it's been a nightmare. And I'm never afforded the same kind of courtesy or respect that white people get. And I know, because I'll be in mixed company with white people, and it'll be a different story for me. So I try to avoid all instances with the police, and I cannot even imagine telling them that. I would never tell the police that I have a mental illness, because who the hell knows how they would use that against me. Not just in a court of law, Attorney Watson.
No, and you know, because I was just about to say that, like, I definitely, if I get pulled over or if I'm in a situation with police, I dare not say anything about mental illness. I've seen that. I've seen how that plays out, and I've seen how that that can be used. So I avoid that like the plague.
Mm-hmm.
Two things I want to say. The first is like a kind of a rhetorical question, and then I kind of have my own experience with that. But isn't it a damn shame that you have to hide or mask your mental illness because you know that you're going to get some type of look, or you won't get the same level of care or treatment as someone who doesn't say anything about mental illness? Like, isn't that, like, really, it's a stain on our society.
You know, the stigma is real.
It's real. It's real. I mean, the fact that you can go into a doctor's office, no one looks at you sideways if you have a cast on your arm, or, you know, some outward physical thing that everyone can see. no one bats an eye when someone has a heart condition or anything like that. They don't withhold treatment from that person. So it just baffles my mind that because you can't see my condition and it's mental,
Mm-hmm.
you judge me a certain way, and it just really pisses me off. But um, the reason why I wanted to believe her is because I've had friends and family kind of put me in the box that people put her into when it came to having to constantly prove yourself. And then when you do, or when you say something, a lot of times the initial reaction is, well, did you take your medication today?
Oh my God, if I have to hear that.
Yeah. Well, did you talk to your therapist about this? Like, have you, maybe you need to talk to your doctor about increasing your meds. Like, if I have to hear that again, I promise you, I don't scream often, but I'm just going to scream.
Yeah.
You you may even hear me from here down there, and like that's how loud I may scream if I have to do that again, because it's insulting and it makes you shut down. And that's
Totally.
yeah, that's why like when I saw this character out, like I said to you before we started recording, there was so much of this movie that's more terrifying than any demonic possession monster movie, any of that stuff combined, because it's real and we live it.
Oh yeah.
Like we live it. So for a lot of that movie, it's like I'm looking in a mirror, or I'm putting myself in the same situation, wondering, would people look at me the same way if I were in a similar situation? And the answer is an emphatic yes. Not only yes, but hell yes. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just terrifying to me.
Hey, preach and preach on. So much so that I thought that the character of the detective who was kind to her and actually like, giving her a little bit of a break where everyone else was really knuckling down on her, I kind of felt like that was almost phony. Like,
Yeah.
isn't that terrible? Like, it's terrible that I should think like a character he's not like he's going above and beyond. He's just giving her a chance to like tell her side and then telling her gently like, hey, look, I know you've been through a lot, so let's just leave it at this. Like, everybody's okay, nobody got hurt, and that's it. Where the other cop is like, you lush, like, how many bottles are you drinking? Like, she's just like being a real jerk. That
Yeah.
to me was more realistic than the nice cop, because I was like, cops aren't like that with people with mental illness for the most part.
She was the rule, he was the exception.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's what it boils down to. That was written in my opinion, to make it look like, okay, well, not everybody's a complete jerk to, and I wanted to say something else, but not everybody's a complete jerk to, to people with mental health issues and different disorders. That not everyone's the same way, but I mean, let's cut through the crap.
Yeah,
That's
for
that.
sure.
Yeah.
And like going back to your points about like, you know, if you say something and then people would just react, family, friends, doctors, anybody alike, oh, did you take your meds today? Or maybe you need to take more meds, like, or maybe you need to talk to your therapist more or whatever. Like, it kind of reminded me, and look, love it or hate it, I'm bringing up Joker, okay? Warning. This is a trigger warning because I know lots of people hate that movie. And you know what? If you hate it, then you hate me because I love that movie. So good on you. But his character says at one point something that really resonated with me as a person with mental illness. And he says, the worst part of having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't, and that's it. That's it. Like, I feel like I can't speak for anyone but myself, but so much of my experience dealing with mental health matters is me having to curtail, curb, hide, stuff, suppress any sort of, behavior that might come across as odd, laughing too much, etc. And I kind of allow myself to do those things when I feel safe, in the movie theaters. I used to always like cheer and scream and stuff like that, because I have all these big emotions at movies. But in general, like I have to be really careful, like not to let my freak flag fly too much when I'm with, like, let's say, like friends who are the parents of my kids' friends or neighbors who have kids at the same school as my son, like it's very much like a deadening of my personality the best that I can do. Because I just don't know what is too much. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm kind of in between there, but there are times when I'm not doing so hot and I need to like make noises and yell or like let out noises because it's like letting out this energy that's like this propulsion that's like moving me too fast. And, I can't do any of that. Like I'm in public. I know how that's going to come across. So yeah, I mean, are we scary? Are we monsters? Is that the way that people look at us? I don't know. There's definitely scores of people who have different diagnoses who cannot help but, gesticulate or, articulate their issues. In this movie in particular, she could not hide like her state of mind. She couldn't. She can't. She is in her like pajama dress day in and day out. You really don't know what day it is in this movie. I will give it a lot of credit for that. You can't tell if a day has passed, if it's night, if it's what, if a week has passed. It's hard to tell, and it's to get us in the mindset of the main character. She's locked in there. Like she's terrified, she can't do anything about this. Her doctor, you hear them in the session and she's like, I'm not going to be having any breakthroughs, like this is kind of it for me. And he's trying to help her the best that he can while also acknowledging like, this is where she's at. And I've got to take it at like, I've got to take her where she's at. Where she's at is she needs more medication because she's really not doing great. And I'm going to just skip forward. She has another situation where she calls the police. They come again. The family comes from across the street and she has a breakdown. What we see is a very like theatrical portrayal of a breakdown where she is told that her family is dead by the not so nice cop, and she begins to remember and that is sort of the big key secret, that's unlocked and displayed to us. Basically, we're given that understanding of why she is the way she is because she had been driving with her husband and her daughter in a snowstorm, going to like a trip, like a family vacation somewhere, and the car flips over. And this is after like an argument with her husband about how they're going to split up, but they want to wait until after Christmas for the daughter's sake. The car flips over and the husband and daughter are killed on impact. She survives. And since then is just, I mean, she hallucinates. She's given medication in the beginning that she's told might induce hallucinations, but I feel like she was already delusional before that, given the fact that like, psych meds don't work that quickly. So it's not like you're going to take one and then 5 hours later you're having a hallucination. It's not usually typical. So, so now we know. So, she kind of has this whole revelation that she's been, I guess, keeping out of her consciousness. Like her day-to-day well-being is being extremely hampered by the fact that she has blocked this memory, which for survival's sake, I get it. This is so traumatic, you know, that she cannot face it until this moment where she realizes that she might be wrong. Maybe nothing did happen. Maybe she is making all this up. Why would she do that? Why is this cop telling her her family's dead? Oh my God, her whole family is dead. Like, and she is all she has left. So it's really a tender moment, and it's really sad. And it really brings us to, for me, it really brought in that aspect of like having compassion for people who are very ill, you know. I feel like in this movie, most people didn't like bully her about not being able to walk out of the house, but she did get some instances of people bullying her about the fact that she can't leave the house. And I think that moment where her, you know, her trauma is revealed just spoke volumes about how she was able to function before and then afterwards. Because I mean, and then as a parent, I mean, we're both parents, Jeff. That is unspeakable, like your worst nightmare, you know. So that was difficult to watch, you know. It was difficult to see all of that. And yet at the same time, I was glad that they really like leaned into the exposition of her trauma, and sort of like that was enough said, you know. So she thinks that the mystery is over. She thinks, okay, like I got it wrong. But it turns out that the mystery is not over, because Ethan, the son who she had made sort of like inroads with, you know, has been like living at her house, unbeknownst to her, like creepily watching her and stuff. She decides to set up her phone and record a suicide note video, and she's going to kill herself. You see her mashing up like a secret stash of pills, and just she has a glass of wine and she's ready to pour that dust right into the wine and say goodbye. And I don't blame her, because if that happened to me, I wouldn't want to live either. So she's recording the goodbye video, and he pops up, and she's still got her faculties about her. She's still got her doctoring, you know, wisdom with her. She knows how to talk to him. And he basically explains that the woman that she thought was Jane Russell was actually like Ms. X, who was his real mom, who had like abandoned him and was a drug addict and had always like left him, so that he was really angry with her and murdered her, and had been thinking about that for a long time. And he had also murdered the woman who was his dad's assistant back in wherever they were, Massachusetts or something. Yeah, and Boston. What's that?
Boston.
Yeah, in Boston. So he murdered that woman too. So, and he's like obsessed with like wanting to see her die. You just get the sense that he is a budding serial killer. He's a serial killer who is, you know, I'm ready to start my game now and like really have at it. Let's kill you too, you know. And then begins the cat and mouse chase of him chasing her around the house, her going up to the roof. He gets the drop on her. She gets the drop on him. She finally gets him. He kills David, the tenant, in the meantime, who actually comes to try to help her. You know, he's like, what's going on? And like, you know, tries to help her. And then Ethan kills him. Not a great big loss in terms of, you know, the movie, just because David was a bad guy too, but whatever. And then she brings Ethan over this like glass sort of like dome that's on top of her roof that's already weak and ready to give. And he just, because he's like on top of that, he just falls through it and dies. And then, you know, that's a wrap on that whole thing. The next thing we know, she's in the hospital. Some gore we get Ethan hooks her with like what are those things, like a rake trowel, like a handheld gardening tool, that has like 3 huge prongs, and gets her face. I was like, all right, cool, we got a little gore. I'm down with that. Yeah, so then we see her in the hospital, and the good cop is there, and she, she's not in any trouble. He's like, listen, just do me a favor, and like, we can't find your phone. Meanwhile, her phone is like, he's got her phone and he gives it to her. He's like, just erase anything you don't want us to see, because he's seen her suicide notes, and that's going to complicate things for her and all of this. So he's like, just delete everything you don't want us to see. And then I'm going to come back in an hour and you're going to give me your phone. Right. And she's just really amazed at how kind he is. And he says at one point, like, listen, I know like all about you, and I know you've suffered a lot, which is why I'm going to give you another chance, And so, and then we see her, so I think, here's my next question. I think the movie could have ended there with her in the hospital. Everything's going to be cool. The cop said she's even allowed to delete the suicide note. It's all good. So why did we have to go to a coda and like see her in her house again afterwards? Are we on the same page with that, or?
Same page, because I feel like the ending that we got was kind of a slap in the face in some ways, because one, that's not really how things go. So that's number one. Number two, the way that the hospital scene ended, I feel like we needed that. Well, we need to take the word of the police officer that was not nice to her. We needed to take his word that she was going to be okay. And, and seeing her there kind of breathing that sigh of relief, I felt like was the perfect way to end it. Because I feel like what we got was too cliche, too, oh, let's put a nice bow on it. We didn't need it. It was already there. So
I agree. That bow, I want to choke someone with it. I wanted to choke her character with it, even though it wasn't her fault. Like I wanted to choke the movie with that pretty bow at the end. Agreed. So the coda was that they go back to her apartment, her apartment building. She owns that building. And she's there and she looks great. She's like wearing like really nice clothes, like boots. I was like, wow, she's wearing boots. That's awesome. She's taking a walk around her apartment. She's saying goodbye to her daughter, in her daughter's room, which I think was just to pull at the heartstrings, and she walks out of there, and she walks out, and you see that there's a moving truck that has been with some moving guys, loading it up, and she gets into a taxi and she drives away, and the moving truck goes, pulls out also, and there's a for lease or for sale sign on the building, and that's what you have. And I don't know. I mean, I just feel like that's really boring. Like, that's such a boring ending. Plus, like you said, things don't happen that way in real life. She has dealt with so much trauma. The trauma of having an attempted murder on her. And I get it that we're supposed to feel like finally confronting her issues and et cetera, has set her free. But that's not how it works. That is not how it works. Leaving her in the hospital in that scene with the cop being understanding of her and saying look, we'll work things out. You don't have to worry about anything. It's all good. The couple is I think the couple, the Russells are in jail, or they're, whatever, they're going to be in jail or something. The son is dead, so there's no threat to her anymore. And I think it says a lot if they were to have left the movie at the end with her being given a break, finally being believed, and the whole legal issue being wrapped up, but her being in the hospital indicates like she's not well. You know what I mean? She's got like the puncture marks on her face all like bandaged up. She's, you know, you're on a lot of psychotropic meds. That stuff doesn't go away. You can't just like come off of that. You know what I mean? And she's going to be dealing with the backlash of having almost been murdered and then having, you know, I don't want to say she murdered him. She was defending her life, but like, you know, there is a murder like that happened in her house. When there's all this death, how is that not a trigger for her? I'm just left clueless. As a doctor to the movies, I would give that a very unrealistic, like no. I agree that she should leave the apartment building. I agree she should move out of there. But if, you know, as my patient, this movie I think needs way more care at the end. Like, no thanks, you know.
I agree with that. I think as an attorney for this film, I feel like the better way to end it is her still being in the hospital, but we see her real estate agent come and say, "Hey, you know, we got the house sold," and you know, like maybe a couple weeks later or something like that. You know, hey, we got your place sold. You can now begin your new life. Fade to black. That would have been better than showing us, like, there's so much trauma that happened in that house that I don't want to see it again after she's out of it.
Word, exactly. I totally felt the same way. Like, don't make me puke by having her go into her daughter's room and like, talk to her dead daughter when we have moved on from all that. Like, I don't know, it's just like much, you know what I mean? And it just wasn't necessary. You could surmise that like her life is going to go on now, you know, and that's enough. As an attorney for the movie, I wanted to ask you, should the parents be put in jail for anything? Because I was kind of confused, like, oh, like when he said like, oh yeah, like, forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. I thought what I'm remembering is that the cop, when he's in the hospital room with her, is like, yeah, the parents are being held or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but what would they be held on, right? Like what or
I mean, we find out that the son has killed the assistant in Boston. Now, the father had to know something about that.
okay.
Let's say that he didn't. Let's say that this was, you know, Ethan's first time, and it was just kind of a, you know, they never really got to the bottom of it. Okay, you cannot explain how Catherine, Julianne Moore's character, gets sliced and diced in that apartment, and the parents not. So, and then obviously they had to know, you know, at some point they had to figure out he's not really in Connecticut like he said he was. He's actually there to do this because the father, and I thought this was the part, like this is what really tied it all together for me when he said that. The father said, "You don't know what kind of family you're messing with." For me, I was like, okay, yep. I mean, at the end, I'm like, yeah, he had to know. Like he had to know one way or another. So
they were complicit.
They were complicit. Yeah.
All right. So let's get to this. On our show, we rate movies based on the headstone system because we are morbid and we like it. We like to be that way. So 1 headstone equals a poop and 5 equals a beautiful flying phoenix. So, Jeff, on a scale of 1 to 5 headstones, how would you rate The Woman in the Window?
I'm going to sit right at the 3 mark because I feel like it was I feel like overall, for the most part, it was a good movie. But there were a couple spots where they gave us too much. And then in some places, they didn't give us quite enough. So I feel like it's kind of that middle of the road. And I really want to give it lower than that because of how traumatic it was at times to watch it. But it really was a well done film, aside from the couple things that we talked about in terms of things that we would have done a little bit differently. But I think it's one of those movies where we always joke about how many times we've seen a movie. I won't be watching this one again. Like I don't think I will be watching this one again. Um, Even today, when I was like, you know what, I kind of want to refresh, and I was like, you know what, now I think I remember it pretty vividly. So I don't need to go back and rewatch this. And it's not because it's a bad movie. It's just one of those movies that's just it's a tough watch. I mean, it's just like back in the day when Precious came out, someone told me to watch it. I watched Precious. I barely got through Precious. The movie for colored girls. I was dating a girl at the time, and we went to the movies to see that, and my palms and my head were sweating the entire time. And there's that one scene that I will never, ever, ever go back and watch either of those movies. So this kind of goes into that category for me of movies that I've watched. I can say that I watched it, and I have the scars to prove it because I do not want to watch it again. So
I hear you 100,000%. Now, on our show, we also ask each other if we would get a tattoo of any image, words, or anything from the movie on our arms. Would you get a tattoo from the woman in the window?
absolutely not. I feel like I already have an internal tattoo.
Yeah,
Own mental health issues that I deal with.
totally.
So I feel like because of that, I don't need one because I'm already permanently marked, and yeah, I mean, I there's no way there's no way I would ever get anything remotely representative of this movie tattooed on me at all. Like it, not at all. And you know, that, that's just me. What about you? Start with the headstones, and then if you would get any ink.
Uh, I'm gonna say 2.5 stars out of. I'm sorry, 2.5 headstone. My head's in the stars. Is what it is. 2.5 headstones, and that's because I have and maybe I'm dim, but I kind of feel like I had some questions left over. My husband just stuck his head in the window and scared the crap out of me. Speaking of scary. Thank you for that. He's so stupid. Like you have to see his face, and he's got these new glasses that are really cool, but they're really dark. And so is anyway. So, I would say 2.5 because I feel like I was left with questions. And I don't really want to feel like I'm left with questions at the end of a movie, unless it's kind of existential questions, stuff to make you think about as a human being in the human condition, but not wait a minute, but who did that and why and where? Wait, but was he involved? Because it seems like he was, those kinds of things. And I attribute that to the fact that the movie, while it was very good, and if you're into this type of, psychological thriller and whodunit, and definitely if you're into Hitchcock, you want to see something that's Hitchcockian. I kind of felt like the movie itself took us so much into her agoraphobia and so much into that apartment and the house that was so dark and lots of billowing fabric and her in her night dress and that it was just kind of I felt like I got sucked way too much into that, and I couldn't, and it was too muddled. I couldn't make what was I after a while I was like, wait a minute, and did I just take a bunch of pills and have wine? That's how I feel, because I can't make out what's what. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it was to put us in our shoes, but it was too much for me. Also, seeing her vulnerability, her crippling vulnerability for so long was like you had mentioned, was just, it was really hard on my mental state. I definitely don't ever need to see this movie again. It's a heavy movie, but it's kind of like sluggishly heavy. Like, it's not just that it's heavy because of the subject matter. It's kind of like, oh, weighs you down and you're not sure what's what anymore and what's up and what's down. So yeah, I would give it 2.5 with the caveat that, like, not the caveat, but with this, kind of asterisk that the performances were all really good. Gary Oldman was, knocked it out of the park, as you would expect him to. The direction I thought was pretty good. Didn't really care for that like nervous breakdown scene where it turned into like a set piece of like, it seemed like it was a play all of a sudden. Like, we're looking at like the actual car flipped upside down in her dining room or her living room. And I was like, I kind of feel like I'm watching a play right now. And I don't really enjoy the theater, so I wasn't really enjoying that. But I definitely, it's not to take away anything. It was a good movie. I just, that's my rating, and I wouldn't get anything remotely associated with this movie as a tattoo because it was all pretty awful. There wasn't anything redeeming about it. I think maybe that's why they added that weird ending of her, in her cool boots, looking like, she looks like Amy Adams. She's gorgeous, so pretty, and like she's healthy and she's well and she's ready to move on, because there was nothing redeeming about anything about that movie. So I guess they felt they had to do that for the audience, but whatevs. So we will be back next week, and we will be back with a classic. We are talking Stephen King's Misery. Thank you very much. So if you want to watch the movie ahead of time and, hear us out on our thoughts, we're just two people of color who are going to go into a blindingly white situation and, just discuss what it is,
You know what? We should ask people, if you're listening, go on social media, whether it's our Instagram or whether it's Twitter, or email us. Email us or leave a comment down here on this video. Who picked Misery? Let us know. Good one,
Jeff. Yep. Let us know. Leave a comment if you think you know who chose Misery for our next episode. And if you get it right, we will give you a prize if you get it right. What the prize will be, we have no idea yet. But there will be a prize. All right. So you guys, thank you so much as always for listening and for watching us on YouTube now.
I already know what the prize can be, Jessie. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's all right. You gonna tell me afterwards?
No.
You tell now. You tell now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a Amazon gift card for a movie on Amazon Prime.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. If you guess right, then you're going to get an Amazon gift card in the amount of a Prime movie. And we're going to go with whoever leaves the first comment on anything, whether you leave a comment below, whether you leave it on Instagram, Twitter, or email. Whoever gets at us first with the right answer, we will give the prize to. So welcome, everyone. And thanks again for hanging out with us. We are just two huge movie nerds who love discussing all things cinematic. So we will see you next week. Bye.
Peace out.
Game over.